welcome to MKByte Tech Tips. Today we're going to look at Android versus iOS. Now, neither of these are exactly the flagship devices for their platform, but we're poor, so this is all we can show you. The Galaxy S2 from T-Mobile and the iPhone 4S. This is the unlocked version, but it's also running T-Mobile. We're poor again. So this is running the latest version of iOS, iOS 6. And this is running the latest version of Android 4.2 on a ROM. It still has a TouchWiz-like interface, this ROM. I'm actually not sure what ROM this is at all. Not my phone. But we're going to talk about the differences, what you should consider when you're considering Android versus iOS if you're not already decided. Some people might sway you one way or the other based off their own personal preferences, but we're going to try and be as unbiased and objective as possible. So with iOS, what you're buying into is fluidity and basically a very stale but stable operating system. So this is based off of the A9 Cortex architecture. That's A4, this is what they're calling it. And it's a relatively fast processor. They underclock it on purpose. The reason for that is they don't want it to run super hot or get too buggy. So it's at 800 megahertz, the 4S. iPhone 5 is up to 1200 megahertz because it has dynamic overclocking, which is actually really nice. Now, the hardware isn't exactly why you would buy an Apple device, though. It's because of how stable it is. So let's say you had a Mac also and an iOS device, like an iPad or something, then Apple would play perfectly into the ecosystem. Don't even try and get an Android. You're pretty much baked into the Apple ecosystem. And if, let's say, you have an Android tablet, and you love Google Chrome, or you're running Chrome OS, or maybe a Linux operating system, then Android actually would fit into that ecosystem perfectly. But let's say you're not in either ecosystem. You're running Windows computer. You're not considering Windows in the mobile to mobile battle. It's just strictly independent devices, iOS versus Android. iOS typically gets apps much quicker than Android. All your devices are going to update at once, so as soon as Apple releases a new operating system, pretty much expect that to be compatible with whatever device you have. So in my case, the 4S isn't the latest device, the iPhone 5 is, but I was still able to update to the iPhone 4S. I still got Apple's map service. In fact, I bought this when the iPhone 5 was already out. I did it because I knew this was still fully supported by Apple, even if it wasn't the newest phone. Don't expect the same kind of service when you're buying anything but a Nexus device on the Android side. So with the S2, the updates are very, very slow. And there's a few different reasons for that. One thing is the updates are tested by Google before they're publicly released. Then they're tested by whatever manufacturer has that phone. In this case, Samsung. So let's say Google releases an update to its Jelly Bean platform from 4.2. And then Samsung tests that platform with their own specific devices, and that testing can take a very long time. Then after that, if this is a carrier branded device, you get testing from the carrier to make sure it works perfectly on their mobile cellular device. So in this case, T-Mobile would test 4.2 running on a Samsung S2 device on their own radio frequencies, make sure everything's compatible and hunky-dory. So that's why you would get the updates much slower on an Android device. But let's say that's not your concern. The device you're buying is the device you want. You don't want it to update itself. Apples to apples, it's that kind of paradigm and comparing it does not work. With Android, you're going to get bleeding edge hardware and relatively smooth software. The reason it can't be perfectly smooth is because Android fragments across a lot of different platforms, and because of that, it takes time to perfect each iteration of Android operating system to each individual specific device. And same thing with apps. You have to write each apps and see objective so that they can work with a lot of different screen sizes, different aspect ratios, different pixel densities, different processors, different amounts of RAM. All that has to be optimized. It's a lot like what's happened to Windows back in the day. Now they're trying to remedy that with Windows 8 and their own unified app store, but that's another topic. With iOS, usually you can expect pretty good performance despite incredibly lacking hardware. So even though this has an okay processor, it's still pretty fast because most of the apps have been easily optimized for this specific device. That's just how Apple does its stuff, and other app partners. So if you want bleeding edge technology and you're willing to pay that premium price for it, Android is a good way to go. App selection may be slightly more limited. It's not as bad as it used to be, but you have to go through a lot of junk apps to get to those cream of the crop apps for Android. If you're looking for iOS, you're looking at stable operating system. Nothing new. It's kind of stale and old. I mean, the home screens are just blocks. I mean, Android has widgets and things like this. If you're looking for something stable, it'll almost always work. iPhone is good, and it has good support also, customer service. Apple is a good route to go. So thank you for checking out our MKByte Tech Tips comparison video between Android and iOS. And I hope you subscribe for more tech tips and other computer videos.